Hey there, you're tuning in to LowKey by Oaky, our easygoing sessions for hotel professionals where we chat about industry trends, issues, and solutions.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for whenever you're listening to this podcast. Welcome to the next episode of LowKey by Oaky. And today we're going to be talking about the power of data in total revenue management. And with us, we have Rebekka, revenue manager at Hotel Okura. We all know her as one of the most forward-thinking revenue managers that we have as one of our Oaky customers. But besides that, I would let Rebekka give a short introduction about yourself. Why would we consider you as an expert in this specific topic?
Thanks, Saahil, for having me, and thanks, Oaky, for doing this podcast with me today. So my name is Rebekka. I'm the Director of Revenue and Business Performance at Hotel Okura here in Amsterdam. I have this position for 5 years now. So I actually started during the COVID period. It was interesting 5 times where we had to be very creative and had to look at more revenue streams. So that's why today we will talk about data and total revenue management. So 2 topics that are very close to my heart, actually.
Brilliant. Before we continue with the conversation, I'm very curious to know about your title and your designation. That's something that we don't see very often in the hotel space. Can you tell us a little bit about what your day-to-day function entails in this title or on this title?
Yeah, I think it is the classic director of revenue plus a little bit more. So I'm not only looking at the typical revenue management stuff, so to say, but I have a bit of a broader responsibility. So I also support many of the other departments in the hotel, especially when it comes to analyzing data and making better decisions to improve our business performance overall.
Lovely. Fantastic to hear that. As you know, our audience base is a bit wide, so we don't only have revenue folks, but everybody in tech to non-tech listening to this podcast. What I'd love to understand from you is, what is the difference between revenue management and total revenue management? And the reason why I'm asking this question is, throughout 2024, we've heard this term being thrown around quite often.
Only 24?
Well, more often than the years before, right? It was really at the height of it. And especially because one of the other trends we've seen is a lot of people talking about gross operating profit, GOP. So for people who are not from revenue management, what are these 3 different terms? How are they interlinked? And why are they important to track?
Yeah. So revenue management we are doing for a while, obviously, in hotels. And then, I mean, specifically rooms revenue management. I think over the last, not only year, but probably over the last 5 to 10 years, we realized that there's actually much more revenue to optimize, right? In many hotels, also in ours, rooms revenue counts only for 50% of the total revenue. So why would you only optimize 50% of your business instead of 100%? So that's why the shift is happening. And obviously with costs increasing, etc., there was also an increased focus on profitability. So in the end, total revenue management is also developing further to profitability management in a way.
Yeah. Having said that, is it a buzzword? Is it something that should stay? How have you transitioned from doing revenue management to total revenue management at Hotel Okura?
I think it's for sure there to stay. Because again, why would you only optimize one part of your revenue and not the complete revenue? I think what is important to start with is bringing the data together, obviously. That's why also the topic of today is the importance of data in total revenue management. Because without the data, we cannot do revenue management and we cannot do total revenue management. So bringing together the data from different departments, from different systems will be key in the next years. But also, on the other hand, don't forget the focus on the guest. Of course, everything we do evolves around the guest. And we are not interested in quick wins, but we are interested in lifetime value. We're thinking longer term and not only for today and for tomorrow. So ultimately, it's about connecting the dots, right, between the different departments, between the different revenue streams, but also between guest data and operations.
Absolutely. And I think you mentioned quite a few interesting things there. One, of course, being profitability. Again, that's a theme that will probably keep recurring over and over again. But what I'd love to dive in or double click on is the data aspect, right? You mentioned you've been now doing this at Hotel Okura for a few years. So when you started from revenue management and shifting more towards total revenue management, all the different data sets, and hotels are not necessarily well known for having all of the data in one place, right? They're in silos. So what was your approach to start figuring out, okay, what data sets do I need? How do I get it? How do I consolidate them into one place to start indeed getting this overview of the guest journey and essentially then maximizing the lifetime of the guest?
I think it starts with reviewing what data you have available, because we do have much more data than we think sometimes, right? If you look at our PMS, our POS, etc., there is a lot of data available, but we just have not been doing very much with it. So obviously it will be our goal to combine this data and integrate this data with each other. Systems are not 100% there yet for us. So what we also did internally is we opened the position of a data analyst. So we do have a designated person in the hotel who is helping us with combining data sets from different systems so that we can go this next step, even if technology is not there yet.
That is very interesting. Do you see this role being very specific to your property, or do you also see this happening as a team in isolation in different parts of the world?
It's one of the first hotels where I have seen it, to be honest. Of course, in many hotels, we have revenue analysts, right, which have been purely focusing on rooms revenue so far. But I do believe the analyst roles is something that we see in other industries. And I do believe that is something that will come more and more, because it is a specific knowledge that not all of us in hotels have these days.
Yeah.
So we need to get this knowledge into the hotels.
I think also very interesting. We normally also see this at being done at the corporate level, at a very meta level, and not necessarily so granular at the hotel level. So that's very interesting to hear that you've been one of the first to kind of start that trend. I do genuinely hope that trend follows and other hotels adopt, because indeed data is the new gold, like they keep saying, or the new oil. And if you're not mining that data in order to get these insights, you're potentially leaving a lot of revenue on the table. Having said that, guest demographics, they again are probably across different systems. How important is capturing guest demographics? How do you currently use that at Hotel Okura to drive the extension of the guest lifetime value?
Super important, because without having this data, we cannot make the decisions. We cannot prepare proper marketing campaigns, right? So we need to know these demographics. I think it's also important to not only look at your internal data, but to look at external data as well, right? We do get information, for example, from the OTA extranets, where we know what's the trends in terms of nationalities, lengths of stay, etc. in the city. Or you have your benchmarking reports from STR or others. So it is important to look at both your internal data and also at external data. Also, what trends are currently happening in the city. Is there a specific movement is developing towards one or the other direction? So you cannot ignore what is happening in your market. And then bringing this information together, the internal and external data, you will be able to hopefully put campaigns out there that are more personalized because they are relevant to the respective people.
Yeah. So again, from what I'm hearing is you really have to be on the pulse of what's happening, and you have to combine all of these data sets. How frequently do you review these data sets to then think of a campaign to offer the guests? Is it like a weekly, monthly, quarterly? What's the cadence?
Well, of course, we as revenue managers look into data on a daily basis, but I would say on a broader scale with more people involved. With marketing, we do that on a bi-weekly basis. And then apart from that, on a monthly basis, for sure, of course, where we look back to the last month and where we are looking into our forecast for the upcoming months. So I think monthly is for sure necessary.
Okay, cool. So this is obviously the theory part of it, right? I would love to kind of dig in a little bit in terms of the more practical implication of this. Could you think of a time where you were able to come up with a campaign? Again, looking at all of these data points, working with the operations team, F&B, marketing, the departments, to actually come up with an offer that, like you mentioned, improve the guest experience at Hotel Okura?
Yeah, I think there's certainly several examples. And it's also always important that we include as many people as possible in these, right? I think it's important that it's not only stirred by revenue management, but that we include the people who in the end will execute these campaigns, who will welcome the guests. So for us, always a good example is the Christmas time, which is super popular in our restaurants. We have 4 well-known restaurants in Amsterdam. But for rooms, it's more of a tricky period, right? And then in the end, we will run into the issue that the restaurants are fully booked pretty early, while hotel guests cannot eat in our restaurants anymore. So what we have implemented 2 years ago is that if you want to dine in our restaurants during Christmas, that is only possible if you're a hotel guest. So in the end, we will have a much better experience for our hotel guests because they will also have the possibility to enjoy both the hotel stay and the restaurant, and in the end have this all-in experience, right? And not just parts of it.
That's a fantastic way indeed to drive more revenue per guest. But also, I think when we talk about like total revenue management, one of the things you underlined there very well is having the entire team involved in this project and this mindset in a way, right? You can't drive it just from the revenue management team. So very, very cool that you guys can do that at Hotel Okura. So what are some of the typical challenges that you've seen over the last 3, 4, 5 years of driving total revenue management at Hotel Okura? One, I think you already mentioned data in different silos. What are the other typical challenges that you've seen?
Yeah. So next, indeed, to data not being integrated, we also have some limitations with some of the technology providers, right? In our example, for example, parking, we don't have a proper parking system that gives me as a revenue manager data per day of week or per hour of the day, especially, so that we could look into optimizing that revenue stream. So you do need the proper reporting without data, no revenue management. But also other limitations sometimes. Why can you book a table that is set for 4 people with 3 people? We're losing 25% of the revenue potentially there, right? Because it is blocked for 3 people. So that's some limitations, and there might be other systems that can take care of that, but that is something that is certainly not helping. And then the other is people, right? We said already, it involves more people. And first of all, we revenue managers are not necessarily experts and have the expertise on optimizing F&B revenue, for example. On the other hand, the F&B teams maybe don't have the expertise to look so closely into the data. So we have to bring the knowledge of 2 departments together to make a good decision. And then in the end, we're looking at total revenue, right? So we need a unified strategy for the whole hotel. Because if one restaurant is, or one revenue stream is only looking at their own revenue stream and is not focusing so much on the total of the hotel, it will be difficult for us to reach these goals. So we have to align also the goals there.
Yeah, lovely. I think when we think about like process change or change management in general, you always think about process, people, and tooling. So I think you very well covered the process and the people part of it. But what about the tooling? Because if you really want to start getting more granular insight into guest data, you essentially at some point will have to also look at potentially improving your hotel tech stack, right? Is that something that you guys also look at and say, hey, which tech provider is providing us a valuable insights? Yes, no. How do you approach that situation as well? Like the parking system that you mentioned was a very good example.
Yeah, so that's indeed something that we are looking to changing. But for us also, what made a big change is the introduction of a business intelligence solution. So of course, we always had data coming from the PMS, coming from the RMS, etc. But with that business intelligence solution, we actually have the possibility to go deeper, much quicker, because we don't have to prepare the reports ourselves. Also have the visualization often ready for us so that we can use it for presentations. So it's saving us a lot of times, and it's helping us to go on a level that we could not go with the POS. So that's the first that really made a difference for us. And the second is looking into the unified or golden guest profile, right? So working with a CDP to bring the information of the guests from the different systems together, so we can really have this one guest profile that has all the information. So we don't have information about Saahil when it comes to rooms in our PMS, and information about your dietary wishes in your POS profile.
Lovely point. So first of all, in the audience, if there's anybody selling parking technology, please reach out to Rebekka. Okay, jokes aside, as a CDP, is there something that you guys also use at Hotel Okura, or is that something you guys are in the process of building yourself, trying to buy a solution?
Yeah, we do work with a provider, and it is work in progress, but we have seen good steps over the last months and years, and it is something that we're also rolling out in the Okura chain, actually. So if you do not know, Okura is a Japanese chain. We are the only property here in Europe.
Rebekka, you mentioned BI solutions and BI tools. What platform do you use at Hotel Okura? Out of curiosity, I'm a data nerd myself, and I have my own preferences and favorite tools. Just curious to hear, what do you guys use?
We are working with Juyo, which is a European solution, of course, that can connect to our PMS, which is obviously very important, and a solution that is also developing continuously, which is great. And we're developing together some things that are important to us.
Yeah. No, indeed. I think Juyo does fantastic work on providing analytics for hotels. So good choice there.
Thanks.
Is there any specific KPI that you would recommend revenue managers, revenue directors to really focus on when thinking about total revenue management?
Yeah, I don't think I have any groundbreaking new information to share here. But there's, of course, three main KPIs, right? That's TrevPOR, TrevPAR, and GOPAR. So the total revenue per occupied room, which you could compare to the ADR for rooms. So just what per room that was occupied, how much did they spend? The total revenue per available room. So that, of course, takes also the occupancy of the hotel into consideration. And then the GOPAR, which is the GOP per available room. When we really want to look at the profit level as well, then I think these three are key. And not only looking at them as the total result, right? Especially when it comes to TrevPOR and TrevPAR, we can measure that on different levels. How does it differ by channel, by segment, by nationality, etc.? So that helps us to understand maybe one channel is much more bringing much more total revenue than the other. Now I really have the possibility to compare Expedia to Booking.com, etc. And now who is my most profitable guest?
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that. We almost towards the end of the podcast, and this is where we kind of go into a bit of the rapid fire sort of round in a way. From your experience, yourself, hearing from your colleagues in the space, what's the one mistake everybody should avoid if they want to implement total revenue management at the hotel?
I think they don't talk to each other. So I think that's also something where we as revenue managers have to work on, right? We sit in our office and we look at the data and we have explanations why something is the way it is and how we could improve it. But we are not out there with the guests, right? So we have to talk to each other and bring our knowledge together to really make a decision that makes sense revenue-wise, but also makes sense guest experience-wise.
Yeah. And why would you say, or what would you say would be the typical reasons why that collaboration, communication traditionally breaks down in a hotel?
Well, I think we had that conversation also during COVID a lot about why commercial departments are not aligned, right? Typically, we all have different goals. We're just concentrating on our department. But to be successful for total revenue management, we have to look at the bigger picture. So we have to work together.
Yeah. And that's also in a way very important note, because by speaking with the front office team, for example, you also capture data that's not in systems, right? You capture questions coming from guests who are checking in. So that's also equally important, I would assume.
100%. I can even give you an example from our Oaky journey. I, in revenue management, assumed that most guests would prefer a view to the city center. If you know Okura, we are a rather big tower in the south of Amsterdam. So I assumed always guests want to look to the city center so they can see the Rijksmuseum, etc. However, I learned from front office that there's actually more guests who want to look to the south because there is also the Amstel Canal and they can see a bit more green. I would have never guessed that, but by talking to the front office team, we have learned that, and the results are showing that we're getting more requests for the canal view upgrade than for the city center upgrade.
That is such fantastic validation of why indeed you should make your front office team your best friend at the hotel.
Yes.
If we have to flip that story to the other way of looking at it, what would be one thing that teams should absolutely focus on getting right if they're implementing total revenue management?
Well, I think data accuracy is still something that is super important, and making the teams aware why it is important, right? Why it is important that we don't create another profile for the same guest, or why it is important that we choose the right segment, because we, behind the computers, will make the wrong assumptions and the wrong decisions. So increasing awareness of data accuracy, and also making sure to keeping it up to date, right? Nobody wants to get a bottle of red wine because that was in your profile 3 years ago, and in between you stop drinking. So also making sure that we keep all of this information up to date.
Cool. What would be your advice to revenue managers who are working for a smaller hotel? They don't have a data analyst. What would be the best way to start cleaning up their data?
I would look at the PMS and see what data you have available, right? Because as mentioned in the beginning, we usually have much more data than we think. We just sometimes do not know where to start. So start with the easy things. Look at the total revenue for the different segments or the different channels. That is something that your PMS should be able to provide you, so that you can make decisions based on that, especially for your high season days, for example, where you want to close out certain segments or certain channels. And then not only looking, of course, at the rooms revenue, but the total revenue. And on the other hand, I would say don't overanalyze, right? Yeah. I mean, we can do reporting for the sake of reporting all day long, but data is valuable when it's actionable, right? It's not valuable when I have a pretty Excel that I can share internally.
Absolutely. Analysis paralysis, avoid that at all cost, basically, right?
Yes.
Lovely. Is there anything that you would really like to cover, but we have not had the opportunity to ask you that question?
Let me think about that. Now, I think the last is maybe a little disclaimer. Don't always follow the data blindly, right? We said already, also talk to the operational teams. Even if it makes sense potentially revenue-wise, it doesn't mean that it makes sense for your guests, that it makes sense for the other teams. So think about the story behind the data, right? Again, it's not about creating €1 higher revenue per day, but it's about creating that lifetime value in the end that will pay back.
Rebekka, we're at the end of the pod. It's your turn to make a shameless plug.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I think, as you can see, I'm quite passionate about what I'm doing, what we are doing. So I think my shameless plug is about working in hospitality and in hospitality-related industries. It always pains me when I see how many hotel school students actually end up in totally different industries. So if you go to hotel school, try out, work in a hotel. It's actually great. And it's even greater at Hotel Okura in Amsterdam.
I love that plug. I absolutely love it. And from our side, Oaky, we'll be at ITB this year. So if you're going to be there, we would love to see you at our booth. We'll probably share our booth details somewhere in the show notes. We'd love to see you there, grab a cup of coffee and talk about more cool topics like we did today.
In my home country, in Germany.
Home country, absolutely. Will you be there for ITB?
I do not know yet.
Okay, we hope to see you there.
Thanks, Saahil.
Thank you very much and have a nice day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers.